So today I'm going to speak a little bit about the nature of reality. Um, I think when we talk about reality's actual nature, a lot of people have a tendency to come up and say, well, reality is really like a dream and it's not real, it's an illusion. You actually don't exist and none of this actually exists. It's all just a projection of consciousness and it isn't real, you know. And I think we have to be so careful with the words that we use and the definitions that we attach to those words in our understanding. Um, because if there's one thing that is absolutely for sure, you definitely do exist. Okay? I exist. I'm here. You're there. All of this is happening. Okay? It is existing in existence. So the world is very real. Reality is real. And reality exists. But we just have to redefine our understanding of what reality is. And it is true. The nature of reality is illusionary. The nature of the world of form is dreamlike and is a manifestation of consciousness, but that doesn't make it not real. That doesn't make it non existent. Okay? There is no such thing as non existence. Reality exists, experience exists. Just because we no longer see it as something actually physical and tangible, it doesn't mean that it isn't real. Okay? Consciousness is real, man. Awareness is real. Experience is real. So we have to be careful because a lot of people come to this realization. They come to understand the true nature of reality and they say, well, if reality doesn't exist and none of this is real, then I can do whatever the fuck I want. And, they sometimes fly off the handle, go into spiritual psychosis even, completely lose their morals and think they can do whatever the fuck they want. So they're not going to be tied by karma because this is all just a dream anyway. And dude, yeah, it is a dream, okay? It is a samsara. It is a conscious manifestation. But again, it doesn't mean that it isn't real, you know? An illusion is a very real thing, okay? It doesn't mean that it isn't real just because it's an illusion. If you see a magician up on stage and he's doing a magic trick, just because the nature of the magic trick is illusionary and gives the effects of magic, doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. It's still a phenomenon in reality that's existing. But the nature of it is illusionary. The nature of it is ethereal. So yes, reality is real, but it's not as tangible as we thought it was. It's not as physical and fuss in its ways and its laws that we thought it was. It turns out that the actual foundational nature of reality is consciousness. It is consciousness. And that doesn't make it not real. Okay, we have to redefine what real means. Okay, we need to understand that real means more than just tangible, physical, and anything limited to the five senses. So why is it important to understand this distinction? A lot of people who come to realization sometimes develop a very indifferent emotional approach towards reality because they really do feel that it's all just a dream and none of it matters anyway. And I think it's important that we have to make the distinction that it is real, that it does exist, and what you do in reality does matter to a degree. Ultimately, maybe not, okay? I do believe that when we die, we go through a process that is very much like waking up from a dream state. I think we will have that same kind of experience simply because we are phasing from one consciousness, we are phasing from one state of consciousness to another. But again, I must stress that the world exists. It does exist. It does exist. And it might not exist in the traditional way that we used to believe, physical, but that does not mean that it isn't real. There is nothing in the world that doesn't exist, okay? Non-existence isn't a real thing, okay? There's nothing outside of the samsara. There's nothing outside of form. There's nothing outside of consciousness. Consciousness is all there is. It makes up the entirety of the universe. And you cannot extricate yourself from that samsara. You can't extricate yourself from what you are. You are consciousness. So you can't put yourself out of yourself in that way. You understand what I'm saying? There's a quote, I think it's by the Buddha, and it said, no matter how hard you try, you cannot throw a stone out of this universe. Okay, no matter how hard you try, you are never going to be able to extricate yourself outside of the realm of form and put yourself in a position of non existence. You can put yourself in a void state, in an empty sunyata state, and you can experience emptiness, but emptiness isn't the same as non existence. You can still experience emptiness, you can still perceive emptiness. You can recognize that you are in a space of emptiness. You can recognize that you're in a space of emptiness. So even emptiness doesn't mean not real. Even emptiness is real. Okay? There is no such thing as non-existence. There is not something that can exist outside of existence. It's like, it can't happen. So the true nature of reality, to try and conclude, is a constantly ever-changing amalgamation of conscious manifested forms. Okay, it's consciousness that is manifesting itself into many different situations, many different stories, as many different beings within those stories. And it's creating world after world after world, story after story after story. And it is creating this constantly changing amalgamation of form in order to keep itself busy during its eternity. You know, what else is there to do when you are an eternal being? You don't need to eat. You don't have anything that you have to rely on in order to exist. You're just an eternal being. So what is the most valuable resource as a being that is eternal? I think it's good entertainment, to be honest. It's good entertainment. It's a good adventure. Like, how am I going to keep myself busy for eternity? And that's exactly what consciousness is doing. Okay, it's created this entire universe in order to experience itself through the modality of forms. And that's what samsara is, man. That's what samsara is. You know, you can't extricate yourself from samsara. As long as you are experiencing something, you are in some kind of samsara. Samsara is all there is. You can't step out of it. Okay, this whole idea of, oh, I've got to escape samsara, like, and go where? And go where? Where are you going to go? You can't throw a stone out of the universe. You can't extricate yourself out of existence. Existence is all there is. So when we start to deal with these ideas like the world is an illusion, the world is inherently empty, okay, we must not mistake these ideas and these concepts for non-existence. It's different. Just because you are experiencing emptiness doesn't mean that there's nothing there. You're looking at emptiness. I can look into space. Space exists as a thing in reality. I can only perceive it in relation to form, but it's still there. So there's no such thing as non-existence. Everything exists all the time, everywhere, all at once. Okay, that's how the universal consciousness does it. It creates everything all at once, all together, all the time. It does that. That's its nature. That's what it can do. It's perfect in that way. It's perfect in that function. And it creates these manifestations effortlessly. It doesn't need any kind of fuel. It doesn't tire. It's an entity that's very hallmark quality is continuous pure creation itself. And as I say this, it reminds me of my own imagination, your own human imagination. That's exactly what consciousness does. It has this ability to effortlessly and continuously, endlessly create infinite scenarios. And that is exactly what the universal consciousness is doing. It's creating constant scenarios that are the endless unfolding universes of samsara. So the world is real, okay? You are real. You exist. But the way you exist, is through a modality of manifested consciousness, not as a something physical built in the world of fixed law. I think that's all I have to say on this subject for now. But this was a really big realization for me. When I first became awakened or enlightened, I really had this idea that, fuck, this is a dream. This is a dream. And I can do whatever I want in the dream because I'm going to wake up one day anyway, and I'm going to feel the same sense of relief about my life as I would do waking up from a dream after sleeping. You feel that sense of relief. You go through a dream that's maybe a little bit hectic. You wake up from the dream and you go, whew, it was just a dream. And you feel the sense of relief and release. And I think that's how it's going to feel when you die. I think you are going to feel that sense of relief because you're going to come into a broader conscious space that is yourself. You're going to realize what life was all about when you break away from the material body and you break away from this dimension of existence. But there is never going to be a point at which you do not exist. There's never going to be a point at which you do not exist. Forms do not go in and out of existence. Okay, they don't come out of nothing and appear to nothing. Okay, all forms are constantly emerging and changing in relation to each other. It's this universal mechanism of interbeing. Okay, everything in reality exists in relation to something else. Everything is connected. Everything is connected through cause and effect. And this connection of form is consciousness manifest. It is consciousness manifest. That's what consciousness does. Consciousness manifests forms. That's what our consciousness does. That's what happens in our dreams. Okay, our consciousness manifests these endless dreams and these endless thoughts and these endless stories. And you don't need to fuel your consciousness with anything in particular in order for it to continue generating these infinite stories. It just does it by itself. And that is exactly what's happening with reality. Okay? As above, so below. As within, so without. As is the universe, so is the self. The very same way that our own individual consciousness has an ability to effortlessly manifest any scenario that it wants without hardly any energy, so the great universal consciousness is effortlessly manifesting us into form over and over and over again, going from one incarnation to the next, experiencing one scenario then the next. I think that's the nature of reality. The nature of reality is conscious space. This feeling of a tangible universe, that's the illusion. It's the belief, it's the idea. And samsara does that, okay? It has this incredible way of, see, I was going to say now, it has this incredible way of making you believe that your experience is real. But the experience is real. The experience is real. We just think that there's a difference between tangible and intangible. We think that there is a difference between the conscious world and the so-called physical world. There is no difference between the inner consciousness and the outer consciousness. The only thing that creates the illusion of a difference is this bubble of an idea. The idea that I'm an individual, reinforced by the self-manifestation of the individual body. And the body is not even an individual. The body exists in relation to the world around it. The body doesn't stand alone. It stands in relation to its environment. Nothing stands alone. There is no difference between inner and outer space. When you die, the conscious space inside is going to naturally re-emerge with the space outside. The same way that if you pop a balloon, the space inside naturally merges with the space outside. The veil between the outer and the inner is a psychological idea that you are separate from the world around you. There is no difference. Reality, there's only one reality across the board. And the foundation of that reality is consciousness. Conscious manifestation, consciousness. I think that's the true nature of reality. And it does exist. It is real. We just have to redefine what real means. We have to change our definition of reality. Not necessarily only tangible experiences, but all experiences, whether they be inner or outer. I don't know if there's anything left to say about that, but I think it's important that we know that distinction. Okay, so we don't lose ourselves to the idea that it doesn't matter. You know, it doesn't matter what we do, it's all just infinite dreams anyway. It does matter. It does matter. Okay, like the samsara was created by the universal consciousness in order to be participated in. We manifested the samsara, okay? You, the self, manifested the samsara in order for you to participate in it. Okay, and when you're living in the samsara as an individual, it's just common etiquette to be compassionate to others, right? To be mindful of others, to be mindful of the other aspects of yourself that are coming to meet you in the form of the individual. Because every individual thing that you see out there is just another extension of yourself. So why would you ever treat it badly? Why would you not treat it with compassion? Realizing that the world is an extension of you, that this self that is us is shared universally amongst all of us. So any harm done to the self is done to all the selves. That's why it matters what we do. You know, you want to go out into the world and act like a big fat arsehole and hurt people's feelings and do, bad things because it doesn't matter, it's all just a dream. One day you're going to have the same dream, but you are going to be on the receiving end of your own actions. And that's how karma plays it out. It's like, right, you want to do an action, you're going to see this perception and this perception of it. Eventually you will have to be on the receiving end of all of your actions. That is why it's important to be mindful of individuals in reality, even though you know deep down inside we are all one. Consciousness plays out every scenario, and you will have to play every actor, every being. And just because you know that all beings are one being doesn't mean that we can't all exist as separate beings. We exist as both. We exist as one being, acting as separate beings. While it is acting as separate beings, it is separate beings. And we have to respect every being respectively. We have to respect the extension of ourselves respectively. Respect the world. Respect yourself in that way. I think that's all that needs to be said. I don't think there's anything else to say about this subject.